I'm looking outside. Welcome, Klaus, East Africa Manager, Confederation of Danish Industry, already there. Thank you so much. And then we have EU Commission. Auntie, is Auntie around? EU Commission. Okay. All right. We can start. I believe the audience is big, so we are live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. If you'd like to tweet, we have the hashtag Kenya Loop Forum. And for this session, I'd like to invite my co-moderator, Obadiah Mongai from NEMA, Senior Principal Economist. Don't be too soft on DG, Mamo. So welcome, Obadiah. And we still have a wonderful afternoon. After this session, there'll be another pitching session. We'll listen to a few more businesses and their business models. And then we still have products being showcased out there. So we have a wonderful afternoon set for us and a cocktail where you can continue engaging the participants and everybody else who's here. Thank you so much. Over to you, Obadiah.
Good afternoon, everyone. So this is another opportunity I get to moderate a panel. I hope you are re-energized for this session. And I'm also looking forward to a very fruitful engagement. Now, before you is quite a distinguished panel. We will hear more from, and this session is now on policies, regulations, incentives. So trying to hear from government what government has in store, and also hear from the Danish side, and also the Netherlands side, and also from the private sector in Kenya. What are some of the incentives or barriers, regulatory barriers, and all that. And again, this is a privilege. I get to interview my boss for the first time to moderate. Yeah, so let's continue hashtagging. Our hashtag still remains Kenya Loop Forum. If you could just have that hashtag on. Let's be attentive, note our questions down. And we again have another session where we interact. So allow me to start the conversation with DG NEMA, DG Mamo. And I would want to start off by requesting if you could share some of the government initiatives in terms of policies, regulations that are in place that would say would promote circular economy. Over to you, DG.
Thank you so much, Obadiah. Good afternoon, everyone. Good. In Kenya, for a very long time, I think we've been practicing what we call linear system of waste management, where products are manufactured, used, and disposed of in the disposal sites. That is why you have lots of waste in a number of counties, despite the policies, regulations, strategies. We started doing waste management regulation in 2006. We had Waste Management Strategy 2015. Earlier, we had EMCA Act, Environmental Management and Coordination Act 2019. Despite all this, we continue disposing our waste unsustainably. But the issue is, unless we have a positive attitude towards the environment, it will be very difficult to care for the environment. A number of us have throwaway culture or attitude. We keep on throwing things out and expecting a government agency or government to pick your waste. So why circular economy? Because the practice has been very unsustainable. It's now for us as a country to transition to circular economy, where we drive value out of waste. And we aim to keep raw materials in a closed loop. Because circular economy model is where resources are maximally utilized and the need for new raw materials is greatly reduced. Therefore, waste is avoided and the life cycle of the product is increased. In short, waste of today becomes raw material for tomorrow, from nature back to nature. And as a country, the circular economy concept is now taking traction, although primarily it's being understood as waste management strategy instead of looking at it in all the sectors of the economy. But under the circular economy, the economic opportunities are far much broader and diverse, but they are not understood. Therefore, as an authority, as NEMA, we need to create necessary awareness, public education, and this needs to be deliberate and targeted and intentional to ensure that the benefits of circularity are well communicated and argumented for smooth integration of circular economy into or in our country. And before I go to the policies in place, successful adoption of the circular economy requires an all-in approach from industry, government, and also the citizens so that we rethink our current model, looking at also the product design, and also revaluing the materials and resources that we have. Now back to policies that government has put in place to create an enabling environment for organizations to go circular. Or rather, CE policies should stimulate the change needed for the economy to be fully circular. And this will also be a close collaboration between partners from industry, government, and academia, so that the circular economy knowledge crystallizes in the right platform for action and uptake for all of us. I know there are great efforts being undertaken in different fronts by KM and KEPSA, working closely with us, but at least we need to pull it a little bit higher. As a country, we've developed robust policies and regulations to address circular economy initiatives. The first one is our constitution. Most people call it Green Constitution. If you look at Article 42 of our Constitution, it bestows on the citizen the right to live in a clean, healthy, and secure environment. And also the right came with responsibility. It was the duty of the citizen to ensure they enhance the environment, looking at a number of issues, managing the waste. Article 70 reinforces or provides for the provision for NEMA to enforce the provisions of the Constitution, to ensure that as you enjoy the right to a clean, healthy environment, then you must ensure that you look after the environment and avoid littering your environment. What is also very notable in our Constitution is the creation of the environment and the land courts. So environmental cases now are being addressed in a manner that we all agree it's addressed properly. Then the Environmental Management and Coordination Act. Currently we are revising the Act and we are enshrining the tenets of circular economy into our Act so that every citizen adopts circular economy system in the management of waste. There are many others I can look into later. Thank you.
Thank you, DG, for that. I think now it's time to hear from private sector. Takataka Solutions, I just want to also hear your views. I know you are in the business of recycling. I look at your website. It gives quite good figures. The number of tons you are collecting every day. The solutions you're providing. So in terms of your success and your business model, would you talk about how your business model is and some of the challenges you are going through as Takataka Solutions in the circularity business?
This works? Yes. Okay, great. So thanks a lot for the introduction, and nice to be here. So let me start with the first part of your question. So what does Takataka Solutions do? And then I'll come to the challenges across the various parts of the value chain in which we operate. So to the first part, so we are an integrated waste management and recycling company. So what does that mean? So we are active across the value chain, starting at collection. So we collect from residential, commercial, and industrial clients. Then the waste, that's the first part. Then subsequently, the waste goes to our sorting sites, which are also, I think, in the new waste management bill called material recovery facilities. So there are lots of sorters sort waste mostly on conveyor belts into constituents, material, plastic, cardboard, metals, textiles, whatever it may be. So that sorted waste is then compacted for further processing. The organic waste goes into our compost plant. The plastics, we operate 2 plastic recycling plants, one for rigids and one for flexible packaging. So that's the fourth part of the business. Then we also operate a small incinerator for hazardous waste. And lastly, because we actually don't get enough plastics for our recycling plants, we also buy back waste from waste pickers at dump sites, which then goes back to our recycling plants. So in summary, it's collection, sorting, composting, plastic recycling, hazardous waste incineration, and buying back waste from waste pickers at dump sites. So that's the value chain. So coming to the second part of your question, so what are the challenges we face? And there are many, and they vary by value chain. So maybe starting, again, following just the flow of the waste. In collection, I think the biggest issue from our side is that there's actually insufficiently implemented regulations or insufficient regulations of who's allowed to collect. At the moment, almost every player in Kenya collects and takes the waste to a public or non-public dump site. So, and I think that when you come in as a collector and you want to acquire a customer and there's someone else offering to provide a cheaper service because they're dumping somewhere illegally at night or just dumping it at a dump site, then that's kind of a challenge in the operating environment, because it's very difficult to be competitive if someone just dumps it in the vicinity of where the waste is collected from. So I think that would be the biggest challenge there, that actually we think, although not everyone may agree with that view, that there's insufficient regulation in the collection space. In the sorting space, I think we are not the only, but one of the very few operators who operate sorting sites, and there's a reason for that. Because sorting sites cost money to operate. Like mixed waste, when you receive mixed waste from households, from commercial buildings, it's not full of bountiful, great waste that you're going to make a fortune from, unfortunately. But it's a lot of mixed things. It costs to separate, and a lot of the things can be recycled, but not all of them can be recycled profitably. So you actually need to be paid a gate fee. So you needed to charge a fee for every ton of waste you receive to make the economics of a sorting site work. And in order to do that, there needs to be kind of enough money on the collection side to then pay for the subsequent gate fee in the sorting side. Now the challenge is, who's the competitor of a sorting site? It's the dump site. And today, the dump site fees in Kenya are too low, so then it's very difficult to justify taking waste to a sorting site. And then the other challenge in a sorting site is how much you receive at the front to manage the waste, and the second question is how much value can you get out of the waste. And obviously, the more recycling happens and the more demand there is for the various materials that you get out of a sorting site, the easier it becomes to operate a sorting site. And the challenge there is that there are many material streams that don't have offtake markets for recycling, be that A, because maybe that technology or capacity doesn't exist in Kenya, or B, because a lot of the waste is simply not recyclable based on how it was designed. So I think those are the challenges around sorting. Composting, it's starting to look more promising in Kenya. I think there is increasingly a market for compost. For a long time there wasn't. And I think it's important to distinguish organic fertilizer or compost from chemical fertilizer. Chemical fertilizer has macronutrients, NPK in high levels. Compost has them in very low levels. So it's a very different product. Compost is a soil amendment and a poor fertilizer. And I think for a long time, people didn't understand the difference. So then when people buy compost, they have wrong expectations, they're disappointed, they don't want to buy again. So I think having the awareness in the market for what compost is, how it works, how it's applied differently to chemical fertilizer, is something that's starting to be there, but it's still at a very early stage. And that will eventually be an everlasting or, well, continuous constraint, because we need a very, very big demand for compost, because 55 to 60% of the waste is organic. Now, coming to recycling, to add to the list of challenges, recycling, there's two kinds of challenges. One is a technology one. You need very high-tech technology to treat very dirty mixed waste, and when you get waste from dump sites, where almost all plastic waste goes today, it's very contaminated, so you need very good equipment to handle it. And secondly, there's a lot of plastics that's designed in such a way that it's really either hard to recycle, or once you've recycled it, there's no one who wants to use it because the properties are not really conducive to making new products. So basically, one, it's a contamination because of everything going to dump sites, and two, it's lack of offtake markets for many materials because of the way the packaging is designed. And then buyback centers, largely, to wrap up the long answer to your short question, I think, there is a lot of demand. Waste pickers are willing to deliver, but I think we just need to be cognizant of the reality that waste picking jobs, while absolutely essential to the more linear driven economy we're in today, are ultimately not great jobs. Dump sites are unsafe environments. It's not good for people to waste pick, even if, organizations like Taka Taka Solutions are trying to help them. There are many others. But ultimately, ideally, there shouldn't be waste picking at dump sites because it's not a safe job. And secondly, the other issue is because it comes from dump site, as mentioned earlier, a lot of the materials are very contaminated.
Thank you for that response. Allow me to prod further. You highlight the various areas where you're having challenges. And the question that comes in is, from a policy point of view, where do you think there will be much impact? There has been a talk of having minimum recycled content. There has been talk of policies that can have demand for the recycled content. There are physical incentives proposals which have been given before, maybe to recycling processes, machineries. From where you sit and the various areas of collecting, sorting, composting, recycling, where do you think there are still gaps? And where do you think there will be the much impact in terms of incentivizing the process?
Well, thanks for that question. The short answer is all of that to various degrees. But I think in short, I think one big problem, as I mentioned, is waste going to dump sites, right? So if waste doesn't go to dump sites and it goes directly into sorting sites at scale, it's already a lot cleaner. So as a result, everything subsequently becomes easier. Washing, processing costs, loss rates, costs, everything becomes lower. So I think the first one important thing to look at, how do you get waste not to go to dump sites, and how would you do that? Lengthier conversation, but one, basically making it too costly for collection businesses to take waste to dump sites. That can happen in various ways. You could increase fees at dump sites, obviously ensuring that that doesn't lead to illegal dumping, or you could give incentives to people operating material recovery facilities or collectors partnering with material recovery facilities. Like, for example, if you were to restrict garbage bags to only those companies operating MRFs or partnering with MRFs, that would be, for example, a significant incentive to push waste away. I think the other things that you mentioned, all of them make a lot of sense. I think Kenya is close to implementing and formalizing extended producer responsibility and making it mandatory. I think that will be a huge, huge step. And other things you mentioned, minimum recycled content, product design, making fees to EPRs dependent on how recyclable or not recyclable your packaging is. So if you make less recyclable packaging, you'd have to pay higher fees so that people are incentivized to move towards more recyclable packaging. Those would be some of the things, but the list is longer, but let me leave it here for now.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for that. Quite a comprehensive response. Petco, you have been in the sector for some time now. And I know you're charting new waters. Would you kindly give us your journey so far as Petco? And what are the areas you think that can be tackled to make you more a success?
Thank you. I know the program says that a certain lady called Susan Maingi, our director, is meant to be speaking, but my name is Gadhoni Methu, and I work for Petco and now PACPRO, which I will explain our journey, and I run community projects and partnerships. Now, Petco, as you can all see, this hotel does not have plastic bottles, PET specifically. So Petco was formed about 4.5 years ago in 2018, shortly after the plastic bags ban, in an initiative to self-regulate. Those of you who were here in the morning, you had Dr. Kimani speak about the journey. And just to summarize our 4.5 years in operation, we have had an amazing partnership with NEMA, the Ministry of Environment and Forestry, and then our other governmental agencies here, Denmark, Netherlands, private sector. Now, what we have been doing is trying to solve a number of Takataka's problems, which he has listed very clearly. So what that meant initially was pushing for incentive to have the PET bottle collected. At the time, recycling rates for PET, and if you visited the PACPRO booth, we were having records of about 100 to 500 metric tons recorded as being recycled. And now, 4.5 years, we have on record more than 10,000 tons per year on record that this has been recycled. And our journey has been that we, as a PRO, as a voluntary EPR scheme, have been giving subsidies to the recyclers to create and make the collection of PET bottles more attractive. And so in 2020, with the draft EPR regulations, Petco's leadership then saw it fit for us to fit and compete for the Category 1 of the regulations, which means non-hazardous packaging for glass, paper and cartons, plastic, metal cans, composite, that's your multi-laminate, your Tetra Pak, your Java products, anything that has more than one layer of packaging mixed into one item, and offer an EPR solution. So what that has meant is we've supported over 2,000 collectors across the country, and that's through training and giving them personal protective equipment. Yes, we do understand that working in dump sites is hazardous and is not the best place, but because the policies at the time we were modeling what EPR would look like. And so for us pushing that we would want to have and see all our collectors kitted, safe, and handling waste in a protected manner, that was essential for us to ensure they are trained, they are made aware of the different materials they can trade in, and that they know where they can take their products. If any of you is in waste management, you know in the rainy season, the prices go up actually, and then they go down. And for us, our recyclers are constantly recycling. So how can we create that awareness to know there's actually a steady price that we are helping control by giving a subsidy? And in 2020, one of the things our leadership also had us do was create an extra subsidy for the recyclers to buffer COVID. So we gave an EPR subsidy, just that usually goes to collectors, then we give an operational subsidy. So one of the successes we as Petco and now PACPRO are leveraging on in transitioning to cover all packaging streams is that we understand that the recycling environment is very volatile. And it's not just within Kenya. We are constantly comparing our local environment, economic environment, and what is happening global. As it is, most of our PET is exported, and so then that means that the prices keep fluctuating depending on the crude oil, the dollar rate, cost of production within the country, access to amenities like electricity and water, getting dirty material. So you take all that into consideration, and then we come up with an EPR fee that we charge to our members. So when Petco started, we had voluntary members, and we had about 6 companies, and now we've grown our portfolio to about 30 companies, not just in PET, in glass, in hard plastics now, in flexible plastics, in paper and carton, in Tetra Pak. And as you had KBL talk about their offer and their solution to try and figure out how can we improve sustainable take-back schemes, is that something that we've been able to leverage on. So once we do training, we're able to ensure or have pilot projects where we have buyback centers linked directly to our recycler. And these we've had in Mathare, in Kibera, and in a few counties in Nakuru, in Mombasa, where we've seen the direct improvement and direct access to people creating jobs. And one of our wonderful stories is hearing a collector who started with Mkokoteni, aka a handcart, and is now an investor. He started with a handcart, and all of you who drive, you know handcarts are a nuisance on the road. But he's now having 3 trucks. He gives about 500,000 to 50,000, depending on how big a collector you are, so that you can have startup capital to then buy bottles and give to him as a large-scale aggregator, who then transports to the recycler. So we've been able to see the success of just us supporting the PET sector, and we are excited to then transition to do the same thing for glass, to do the same thing for your milk sachets, to do the same thing for Tetra Pak, to do the same thing for, nobody wants to talk about them, your tea, your Ketepa, your Java coffee, those that must not be named, and leverage on the partnerships we've been able to succeed on. So that's where we are now, and we're happy to continue.
Thank you. I think we'll come back to that to broaden it further. Allow me now to shift to Mr. Anti. I hope I pronounce your name correctly.
Very well.
Director, Sustainable Finance, Investments and Trade at the EU Commission. Could you please tell us how EU can contribute to the transition to circular economy in Kenya, and maybe also what opportunities or challenges you see for sustainable finance and investments, and basically how that contributes to green jobs, and that's how that can contribute to green jobs in Kenya.
Well, thank you very, very much, and first of all, really thanks for being able to join this First Loop Forum on circular economy. Really value on behalf of the European Commission the opportunity. So maybe if I were to give you a few pointers, let's say 3 elements. What is the European Union doing now to steer this ambition? Secondly, how we would like to trigger a bit of ambition also internationally. And then third, how we work with our partners, and in particular how we see it in the case of Kenya. Starting with the EU and how our ambition on circular economy transition translates in Europe. We have a comprehensive action plan that we have produced in 2020, which covers the entire life cycle of products. And so this has 3 focus areas: products, key value chains, and something that we can describe as less waste, more value. And the action plan proposes a model to actually reduce our consumption footprint and double our circular material use rate in the coming decade. And this is very much in line then our big ambitions of the European Green Deal, where we want to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. And to achieve this, the action plan produces also actions along the life cycle of products, so that we can change the way we produce and consume. And we would like this then to also trigger, indeed, progress at the international level. There's just a few pointers in the action plan that tell us what we'd like to see happening and where we are putting our weight behind. So firstly, we try to steer the international efforts to reach a legally binding agreement on plastics. And secondly, we'd like to create something that we call Global Alliance on Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency. And thirdly, we really want to promote the global circular economy transition through multilateral and regional bilateral policy dialogues, as well as environment and free trade agreements. And lastly, we really want to build stronger partnerships with the regional platforms like we have in the African CEE Alliance, or for that matter, Latin American, Circular Economy Coalition. So we want to be a strategic partner in that effort. Now, in terms of stepping up then the engagement with our partner countries to support in the transition. So we really work at different levels, global, regional, bilaterally, to support the transition and really try to help facilitate the compliance with the new rules, with the legislative frameworks that we have ourselves, and that in particular in the low and middle income countries. So bilaterally, we work in partnership with our partners on capacity building, including on policy and regulatory environments, enhanced dialogue, or technical cooperation. And so we also want to work on business support networks and support access to finance for circular economy investments. Also, perhaps to exchange on best practices. There is a number of things, we can call it like inspiring and learning, developing awareness and knowledge. We want to enable, so that's really the work that needs to be carried forward on the environment, on the business environment and investment climate. Financing, you asked about that. Yes, we do have various ways of financing through different modalities that we do. Maybe to mention, for example, in the case of Kenya, that we are now in the plans of our 2023 annual action program, putting 5 million to the access to finance on circular economy, and that's something that we hope to roll out, commit perhaps in the autumn, and then roll out a bit later. So that's coming, and this is also something that we do in a sort of a Team Europe approach, so that it's not just the European Commission but our member states that are working with that. That brings me to our work and cooperation with Kenya, which we really appreciate. We would like to welcome and really also congratulate Kenya on the way they are taking the circular economy agenda forward. We really need economies like Kenya showing that kind of leadership. And we really thank Kenya for being among the first countries to have joined the Global Alliance on Circular Economy and Resource Efficiency, and also the active role that Kenya is playing on the negotiation on the global agreement on plastic. On the continental African level, the Commission has joined forces on the African Circular Economy Alliance, and we really would hope that Kenya also would be joining that alliance. So just to say that at domestic level, we really think that the policy engagement that Kenya has shown is really great. For example, through the landmark decision, such as the use of ban on use of single plastic on sustainable waste management bill as well is another one. And we are really, really pleased to support the Kenyan action through our programs also in the future. Say that the regional action on support of circular economy in southern and eastern and southern Africa is really currently being designed, and this should hopefully provide then yet another additional tool to deepen this cooperation. So we're very, very pleased with the cooperation with Kenya, and we think that, we've heard from the private sector players. I think it does provide green jobs, and we are there to do our utmost to help in various ways for the transition, but also for the green jobs. So thank you very much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much for those comments. I think there's a lot to pick up from here. It's quite a lot that can be crafted and discussed. Allow me now to shift gears to Danish. In the morning, we had the ambassador, Tonke, talk of Kenya, Netherlands, Denmark as front runners in this space. And I know he also he emphasized the role of the private sector in seeing the move to circular economy more of an opportunity rather than an obstacle or a barrier to trade. And I know Danish industry is quite ahead in this, quite a big organization. I appreciate 19,000 members I see on your website, cutting across IT, health sector, and many other areas. So maybe you could share your views so that the others can learn, and even our Kenyan counterpart here, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, and the government and other stakeholders can learn how DI has been promoting circularity in Denmark, and what models have worked in Denmark that could maybe be embraced here in Kenya in order to transit to a circular economy.
Yes, thanks for that, and good afternoon. Just for introduction, Danish industry, equivalent to Kenya would be KEPSA, FKE, and KAM under one roof. So we're both employer organization and business member organization. So that explains the very high number of 19,000 members. I think for us, we've been fortunate that there are very good relations between the public sector and the private sector in Denmark. And that's due to a very strong labor market foundation. And I think the Danish ambassador alluded to that this morning, saying that our adventure towards green transition really started in the 1970s, where the population actually said no to nuclear power. So we started in the 70s looking at renewable energy sources because we knew the demand was going up in terms of energy. So you can say we've had a long time to work on business plans and what works and what doesn't work. From our end, it's both push and pull from the public sector and the private sector. It's not like we're waiting. The Danish industry members are not waiting for the public sector, the government necessarily to push them. We have the luxury of having a consumer base that's very educated, and they've been on board from the beginning in terms of sustainability. So the way we see it and the models we see come out are really, it's from both sides. And when you look back to 2015, Denmark was the first country that the Ellen MacArthur Foundation used to do a countrywide study on circular economy. And they chose Denmark because we're also a tiny country of 6 million people. So it's a perfect lab to test out something new. So I think if anything, why we've been successful in circular economy is that because we are used to living off of business modeling, because we're an exporting nation. So the lessons learned from our side is that you need to test out, trial and error. You need a lot of public support to provide subsidies. Something we found is missing, perhaps in a Kenyan context, is subsidies. A lot of the companies pitching here today, startups, SMEs, they're not relying on any subsidies from the Kenyan government. This is pure organic growth, and it's going to be an insanely hard journey for these companies. So if anything, as an encouragement, I would say to the Kenyan government to focus on subsidies to support these companies, because it doesn't come by itself. Organic growth is very hard to do when you want to build up a business based on circular economy models.
On that, maybe just to prod further on the subsidies, how has the government buy-in to those subsidies been? How has that been? How has the process been? Of course, subsidies means losing government revenue, or even tax incentives. How has that agenda sailed through on your side?
It's been tax incentives is one thing, but also believing in businesses. And so there's loan models, and there's also pure grants, right? And we have a district model where we have a number of business centers around the country that provide such grants and loans. So it goes back to the element of trust and the necessity of investing in small companies. We have all the big players we need in the room, but we can't forget that 90% of our member base are SMEs. Just like FACAM, just like KEPSA, the bulk of the companies are SMEs that need support.
Thank you. Let's hear from Invest International. If you could tell us how are you promoting circularity in Kenya and in Africa in general?
Yes, hi. Hi, my name is Femke Bos. I'm working at Invest International from the Netherlands. One of the main sectors that we focus on is actually the sustainable manufacturing, or focusing on the circular economy. And there's a reason why we chose this sector, although it's definitely not the easiest one. We're involved in agri-food, in water and infra, in the healthcare sector, and climate and energy. But this one in particular is posing real challenges, especially in Africa. If you look at how much of the economy is circular as of today, it was 10%, and that's on a global scale, and it's actually declining. So actually, there's not a lot of reason for optimism, but it does call for very bold action, I would say, because we're not moving in the right direction. How do we incentivize it? We're actually financing that transition, and I think that's very important, that more financial institutions put their money into the transition and stop focusing on financing the linear industry, but moving more on transition and towards a more circular economy. I think that is extremely important. Other things that we're trying to do is really get the technology that is working in our home country to export that technology basically, and making sure that it benefits others. I come from a country where landfills were banned a very long time ago. So actually most of the waste is treated. There are no open landfills anymore. It's also because our country is too small, so we just didn't have the space. But actually there was a real effort to move into that. And if I would ask you, the people here around you, so who is doing something, who is doing recycling of waste? Can I see a show of hands, who's doing that? Oh, it's quite a bit, but not everybody, you see? So there's also a lot of awareness needed and created that it's important to not only recycle, but also reuse and actually redesign. The designing phase, so you need to focus on all these efforts to look into the design, first of all, and make sure that it's circular. So I used to work for a private sector company, and they built a new head office, and it's completely circular. So you can just, it was built up, you can tear it apart, and then, build it again somewhere else. So and that's quite, an advancement. So it is possible, the technology is there, but also financial institutions need to put, the money where their mouth is and start investing in that transition. So I think that's extremely important. Thank you.
Thank you for that. I want to go back again to DG NEMA. NEMA has had a journey with the private sector, and one of the things that NEMA has been doing has been to assist companies comply to the various legislations that are there. Maybe you could share, DG could share with the audience the experience that NEMA has had as a regulator with enforcing and assisting compliance.
Thank you so much. I think before I respond to that, there were really two pieces of legislation that are very key for the adoption of the circular economy. Last year, the government, or rather Parliament, enacted the National Sustainable Waste Management Act 2022. And the objective of this act is basically to promote circular economy and also advocate for responsible public behavior in waste management. As an authority, because waste is a devolved function, although basically waste management is everyone's responsibility, the Constitution devolved this to the counties. And as an authority, we've been working very closely with the counties to ensure that they manage the waste at the source. But that has been very difficult because counties talk of lack of or inadequate resources to manage the waste. The other important piece of legislation is the draft EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility Regulation, because I forgot to mention this in my earlier presentation. The purpose of EPR is also to promote circular economy and environmentally friendly produce designs. We've been working very closely with KM and KEPSA, indeed having a framework of cooperation with the private sector to ensure that they put this into practice. Although still in draft, it has undergone validation, and very soon, hopefully, the Parliament will pass this and be able to start implementing this. Also, the Kenya Kwanza manifesto of the bottom-up approach, it's important because they address, or rather it addresses issues at the community level. The community-based and community-owned value chains where waste collections are organized, or rather waste collectors are organized as cooperatives with provision for waste segregation at the source. So for the private sector, we have, because basically NEMA, other than doing enforcement, we also do a lot of education. We have a program for the industries that we call compliance assistance, where we sit with an industry or an entity and do compliance plan, ensure that we work with them to ensure they comply. Because the essence is compliance, is not really to punish the industry. As a regulator, our job is to regulate industries, to innovate, ensure that we work together and ensure that this is done. Thank you.
Thank you so much, DG. I want to get back to PACPRO. During when I was having lunch, I had a discussion with one of your colleagues, and a discussion ensued around what are some of the incentives that you as a private sector involved in the value chain of collecting, sorting, what are some of the concrete proposals that you think government has not put in place yet and should be put? The reason I bring this up is there was also a discussion, you want to validate that also, around PET, whether the recycled PET versus the virgin PET, how does it fare in terms of cost? So what are some of the areas that you think that government, as far as Kenya is concerned, can still incentivize to make that whole business more?
Thank you. It's good that you asked that question because DI just mentioned how government subsidies are so important to promoting business. Earlier, I think around 2019, 2018, there was a fiscal incentive on recycling infrastructure being imported in the country. But one of the things that's been inconsistent, unfortunately for us, is that some incentives are put and then are taken away. So currently there is now no incentive for importing infrastructure for recycling. So given that recycling material, most of it is bulky. The need for compressing, the need for baling, the need for crushing means that we must have machinery. So just making that attractive, one, for the local manufacturers, we have had, and here supporting local business, someone mentioned that the need for R&D and research is important. So even on that front, in supporting our institutions to be able to come up with high quality material, because we will get some of our investors purchasing material from Kenyan products, but unfortunately they don't meet the match. And so for sure, if you ask Daniel if he has locally made products in his infrastructure, most of it is not. And it's just not that he doesn't want to, it's just not going to meet his standard. And so as CAM, I'm sure that's not good business for the country that we are importing most of our material. So that's one, that we make, one, the technology and the research to be, the standard to be raised, and also that it's attractive that we are able to manufacture at low costs, because it might be competitive, but the cost of importing this infrastructure versus making it locally, you really need to be a good Samaritan that you're doing business only with Kenyan products. So I think that's one big challenge. Next, I would say, yes, we are waiting for EPR. And when it comes to the borders, so the borders are very porous in terms of having a record for manufactured goods in the country. So we don't have clear data on what has been produced or what has even been imported, but that we can account that this is the volume that's in the country and these are the players, and that they're able to then pay their EPR fees. Everyone is waiting for the mallet to be passed down, but the transition has started. And so for us, some of the things we're doing is, and we're very thankful for the partnership with KRA, is getting that data to know who is actually importing material in the country. Are they all on record? We constantly hear of counterfeit products, and I know our illicit brewing is high in that. So the regulations and the enforcement around counterfeit water, counterfeit juices, counterfeit, that makes it very difficult, because the EPR scheme is a form of regulation, even for high quality standards. If we're saying we want to ensure that we are getting to a point where we're recycling bottle to bottle, we need to ensure that we are taking back everything, and that there are laws that make it very difficult for counterfeit production to happen, because then they're stealing and trading as Coke, or trading as Unilever, or trading as somebody else. On the positive side, one of the incentives we are hoping to get is, we've had some of our manufacturers actually improve their packaging to more sustainable products. Unilever has their Vim, their scoring powder is actually made from recycled hard plastic. Coca-Cola changed their green bottle to a clear bottle. Biofoods, and these are all our members, Biofoods reduced the opacity by 50%. And those of you in manufacturing know any slight change in your product design is a huge cost for the manufacturer. And all of this is under voluntary nature. So we do appreciate the strides they've made out of their own volition, but now we know that, and if you look at the scale of these companies, these are all very highly sustainable companies. But without any enforcement to make it mandatory to have green packaging or sustainable packaging that has labels that can be recycled or that can easily come out, etc., etc. The recyclers constantly give us reports on what works, what is recyclable. Then that's an area we would need government support to ensure that there is a tightening of the belt to not allow strange colors of packaging to be produced in the market. One of the things I would say government has been, it's not all gloom, is that we've had a lot of engagement with the ministry and with NEMA, and that has allowed us to actually give this feedback. So there's nothing I'm telling you that DG is in shock. And that for us is very encouraging, because these are our enforcers. So taking into consideration the challenges, we are pushing for standard. And one of the things that we're happy to report on is that PACPRO does sit on the task force coming up with a standard for RPET in the country. So there have been some strides that have been made, and we are thankful to the government and parastatals that have allowed for us to give input and technical input so that they can then shape the policies that need to be made. So even the EPR regulations, that has been an extensive back and forth between private sector and public sector. So there is hope that government is actually taking our feedback and coming up with policies to encourage the recycling industry and circular economy.
Thank you so much for that elaborate response. We want to now get into a question and answer session, but before we do, I think it's also just to mention that the government has published green, whatever, policy on green fiscal incentives. I think it's important that we also give our inputs to the process. At this juncture, please raise your hand. We take, depending on the numbers, we can take the first round. Just mention your name and to who the question is you're directing to. This time we'll start from the back. Please raise your hand. Someone can supply the mic at the back. Just mention your name, keep it short, and mention to who you're directing a question to.
Thank you. My name is Rodney Omari, from the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry. Just a point of note and a question. The government was working on a process where we try to, incentivize the whole circular economy through coming up with a change in the Public Procurement Act, so that we encourage public procurement and encourage green public procurement, so that the government, being the biggest spender, can buy more circular or circulary or green products. And now my question is to the PRO, I think represented there by PACPRO. In my conversations earlier in the morning, there is the issue of, yes, we are trying to promote recycling, but then how do we improve the quality of recycling by, upcycling and not downcycling? A case in point where you find a finer product or a better quality PET, and you using that to make, let's say, paving blocks or something, instead of try to maintain that quality of the virgin or the first kind of product, the first, wrapping or packaging material. So what is it that is lacking in that space? Because I understand with the PRO it's more self-regulated. Is it a problem that you need to raise your standards? Is it what is it, and how maybe can the government incentivize and the others come up so that to make sure that we don't always turn everything into fencing posts, and we want to make sure that the quality is maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Anthony Kerori from Green Pencils Limited. Basically, we manufacture pencils by recycling paper, and also we make cat eyes. Before I ask my question, allow me, can I comment on what he just asked? I think the easiest way about the question of upcycling is for government to buy products from the private entities. The more they buy, the more the private companies will improve or increase on their standards of the products. Now, my question is basically to DG, NEMA, and of course, most of you up there who deal with government. We are discussing of what we can do to, I'm focusing more on opportunities to incentivize investments in circular businesses. So I'm thinking, let's focus on the low-hanging fruits. Let me give a practical example. In any landfill, 26% of the waste basically is paper waste. Now, if you take 100 kilos, each producing 1 kilo of carbon gases, 74 kilos will produce 74, of course, 1 kilo will produce 74 kilos, but the 26% of paper waste, when they rot and they produce 1 kilo, paper produces methane. Methane is 25 times more potent than carbon dioxide. So the 26 kilos will produce about 650 kilos equivalent of carbon dioxide. So it's good to focus on minimizing on the paper waste. So what I'm saying is this: while it's good to look at what we can do, can we also look at what is already being done by private companies who are already in the manufacturing or are recycling paper waste? For instance, a good EG, yours truly, we are working with paper waste, and then maybe through DG NEMA, and then through the Kenya government, if the Kenyan government would start focusing on products like we make pencils, and all in Kenya we cannot make wooden pencils in Kenya because you cannot cut trees, so all wooden pencils are imported, yet we're still throwing away paper. So if government can take advantage of such a situation, whereby we reduce the amount of paper going to the wastes, to the landfills, and at the same time creating employment here, what will that do? Will reduce the paper reaching to the landfill, will create a lot of employment here. It will encourage other people in other sectors to venture into the same, and other countries can do the same. Thank you.
Let's get another round. Yeah, go ahead.
My name is John. I'm coming from Nayuki. I have a farm in aquaponics, multi-loop aquaponics. We grow lettuce and fish together. It's data-driven, and we are using a lot of compost, and we're also using a lot of urines in our system. It's a trail farm, so it's not really that we are on the market. What I want to know is, what is the view on NEMA when you use urines in your system, when you use compost in your system, when you use feces in your system, because it looks like that chemical fertilizers and sprays, they have an advantage to organic fertilizers and sprays. And that's a very funny way of looking at fertilizers. Because when everybody wants to know what they are eating, that they are actually eating feces and urines, I think they're going to lock me up.
Would you maybe suggest what your proposal is in regards to that?
Yeah, it's not only a discussion in Africa, it's also a discussion in Europe. It's something what I actually don't know. The same with waste. You use waste, let's say cow dung. When you use cow dung in Kenya, there are a lot of antibiotics. In chemical fertilizers, there are no antibiotics. But when you look at cow dung, nitrogen, phosphate, potassium, the ingredients are the same.
Okay, next question.
My name is Muhammad Iqbal. I'm a recycler. Mr. Daniel, he gave a very comprehensive our challenges, and he is our leader in this industry, and we really appreciate him, and you give him a good honor. He's here with us. My concern is only very small things, what we are talking, like on the plastic recycling. The big challenge what we are feeling is like a bottle is a PET and there is a paper with a gum. And if we are just recycling, it is taking too much manually time, and it is cost effective. So we also want to request DG, NEMA, so they can also look at it, and especially those plastics, there is a written only recycle it, but not mention what type of this plastic, like if there is a PET written, PET, PVC, there is a PP written, but some are very complicated and we can't know, and even if we use it, recycle it, it's become a contamination, and it's become like a very low grade our granulars. So even our customers, they are not happy with us, and it should be very strict rule on that one. If you are producing something, you have to mention over there. And moreover, the fee of the NEMA is about 40,000. Like we are affording, we are doing, and the other charges are over there. If you are really serious, you have to reduce it. Or maybe we can suggest it, they can for 2, 3 years, 4 years, they can just finish the fee and let the people come in the network, then they can start to charge them.
Thank you for that. Let me see the rest of the hands so that we can see whether you need to take. I suggest we first respond to those, then we can have a second round. And in no order, I would suggest you have the mic. You could go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. I will speak regarding the RPET and paving blocks and construction blocks. There's actually a question you had asked, how does it compare to use recycled material versus virgin? And that's probably an area that needs more fiscal incentives from the government. As it is, it would be more expensive to use recycled material in your factory. It's just cheaper to import virgin and then use a virgin product. But then one of the things that we are going to be pushing our members is to declare, or for us to come up with a strategy for 30% or 50%, depending on the what we agree with NEMA as a standard for RPET that's being used, or our recycled material that's being used in your packaging. So once the law is in effect, that is one of the incentives, or because that makes it attractive for local recycling, because then there's local market that's uptaking the RPET. Now, when it comes to making the paving blocks, as it is, and Daniel alluded to it because he said we don't have material recovery facilities as the first contact point. So because material goes anywhere and everywhere, then there's no way to control who gets access to it. Ideally, and that's very ideal, that material would all go to a material recovery facility, it's sorted, and then sold to recyclers, and recyclers can, transporters or aggregators can come and collect or purchase it from the material recovery facility, and then it would be graded. So probably what is really not so clean would then go into construction. So that's the ideal system, but as it is, you're getting material from trenches, you're getting material from collectors. A collector is just interested in selling their material. So at the point when they found a buyer, they're not really concerned who is buying it. But we are concerned who is buying, but up until we are able to organize the system, we'll sort of just let it flow and then divert the material. So if we can get the material to go to a transfer station, then it'll be easier to organize it. And I'll let Daniel speak a bit on.
Thanks, Gathoni. Yeah, maybe to add to that, and as an answer to question 1 and 4. So I think generally recycling always leads to lower quality today than virgin products. Even our PET today is not endlessly usable. You can make recycled PET that can be used again for food grade consumption a few times, not endlessly. That may change in the next few years, but just keep that in mind. So recycling today, even the most circular version of it is still effectively downcycling. So the question, unfortunately, we're facing is how slowly are we downcycling as opposed to are we really circular, right? And so the question is how can we slow down downcycling and maybe eventually with the right technology go to something truly circular, like in some product categories like glass is already possible. And I think it's an echo of all the various points. So 2.4, yes, if product is better labeled, it will make sorting easier. If product doesn't go to dump sites but to material recovery facilities, it's cleaner. If material is not multi-laminate materials made of different types of polymers or different cross materials consisting of plastic and cardboard in one, then recycling is easier and you have a higher quality product. So all these things have to come together. And then also lastly, for you to get to a quality that something can go into a food grade application, again like PET, you basically have to take the plastic through a vacuum step so that all kinds of pathogens and bacteria are killed off, and these machines unfortunately cost a fortune. So we're looking at roughly 50 to 100x an investment cost of a low scale PET recycling plant that might cost $100,000, and if you're looking at a bottle-to-bottle recycling plant, at the lowest, you're starting at $5 million, right? So I think that's also a reality we need to be aware, and no one will make a $5 million minimum investment if they don't have guaranteed access to huge volumes of waste which again then comes back to how is the sourcing working, how is collection working, are enough material in a clean, separated manner available in large quantities? And the question, unfortunately, today in Kenya to these questions is no. So I think all these things have to come together for us to move towards more circular packaging, and I think the last recommendation fits in. Very quickly on the fertilizer topic, to my knowledge, I don't think there is a standard for organic fertilizer in Kenya. It doesn't cover, yes, there's a compost standard in Kenya. It doesn't cover urine, from my knowledge, but it does cover other kinds of organic wastes. So I think there is progress, and maybe Kenya Bureau of Standard would be opening to widening that conversation to other things. But yeah, that just as a quick comment.
Thank you. I think the question from Anthony on the challenges of recycling, majorly it's the issue to do with the logistics, collection of this waste from the environment to the manufacturer site. We have a new law, a new act, the National Sustainable Waste Management Act 2022, which makes it mandatory for sorting of waste at the source so that the manufacturers are able to get clean materials to recycle. Then if you look at our waste stream, especially from major towns, 60% are basically organic. So there are opportunities in doing fertilizer and other stuff from this organic waste. And government has really given a number of incentives. If you look at what is provided for by the Finance Act 2022, that exempts manufacturers, or rather those who have the plant or who are bringing in the machinery, for manufacturing 16% exempted VAT, and I think they've also reduced corporate tax from 30 to 15%. I know our friends are looking, this has been removed or scrapped during the COVID because of the post-COVID recovery. And I think we are also working very closely with National Treasury to ensure that these are taken back again to really have our manufacturers really getting into this. Because of this plastic packaging material regulation that is coming up. Because Regulation 23 really makes, or rather promotes the proper packaging materials to be used by manufacturers. As an authority, we will work very closely because we have an engagement with CAM and KEPSA to ensure that we promote manufacturing in our country. Then on the issue of the fees, the tax, not just the tax, but fees of 40,000, this is basically for monitoring and processing of our licenses, because our licenses are conditional licenses. As an authority, we really needed to follow up on this and ensure that once we issue out the license, we monitor the condition of this license. Last year we were in Germany, and I'm happy with the chairman of the plastic group is here, that we, as number we charge 40,000, in Germany is 5 times 200,000 for the same. And I think he can confirm that. So my friend, we are likely to raise it up by 5% if we can borrow from the Germany case. Thank you.
I think we can have a quick one more round. Yes, let's start from the front this time round.
Hello, my name is Robert Backlund from the European Union delegation here in Kenya, talking about opportunities to incentivize investments in circular businesses. I have a question directed perhaps to several of you in the panel. How do you see the importance of global value chains, or value chains that go outside of Kenya, knowing that, okay, it's one thing to build up a market in Kenya, but many times it's not sufficient for attracting investments. You need to work on a regional level, perhaps even at a global level. That would in turn call for standards to be set at a global level so that purchases of second-hand materials know what are the purchasing, what is the quality of it. So this is, if anyone wants to reflect around that, and notably we know that in the EU we are setting up global value chains in many of these areas. And does that matter to Kenya? Does it matter to Africa what kind of standards we set up in Europe? Or do you rather see that Kenya or Africa would need their own standards to facilitate the trade in reused materials? And obviously, how does this connect to the opportunity to actually attract larger scale investments? Is Kenya more at a point where you make smaller pilots attempts to try out the technology, to try out how you gather the materials from the dump sites or replace it being even put at the dump site? Or in what segments is Kenya ready to scale it up, to go broader and perhaps work and trade more at a regional level? Chairman, you can decide to who you want to direct this question, because I think it touches upon what many of you have been saying. This is very interesting. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Olonde Jacob from Rubicon and also research at ECAS Institute. There is a write-up going on around the social media on research done by the East Africa community. East African is a paper. And the title of the write-up states, "Donated Clothing Worsening Kenya's Plastic Pollution." Inside the report it states, 1/3 of all second-hand clothing shipped to Kenya in 2021 was plastic waste in disguise, creating a slew of environmental and health problems for local communities. At the end of it, it states, much of the clothing shipped to the country is made from petroleum-based materials such as polyester. Now, with that in mind, there is a research which was done by UNIDO in 2020. It states that the title was on plastic value chain in Kenya, and they proposed some measures which I think you have been able to address. One of it was the investment in waste infrastructure. My first time in Sekondia, I volunteered with the Nairobi City waste collection, and I think things have not changed much in terms of infrastructure. I've traveled to Europe, and when we talk about infrastructure, we need to really give it a lot of attention when we talk about improving our waste systems. Number two is fee modulation, which the DG has mentioned, so I don't need to talk on it. Lastly is the issue of design change for increased recyclability. Design change. In Denmark, I liked it. I liked this because they have a lot of focus on waste, on a loop, on circularity. But locally, based on the East African write-up, we find that things which have already been utilized, consumed, are finding their way back here. Because when you talk about plastic in Kenya, people just know the takataka, the plastic bag. But there is this hidden waste which is coming. I'm not a recycler myself. I'm a recycler in practice, but I'm not a recycler in the commercial side. So I might not know how this waste is helping in the industry. But I feel that through the DG, through the policy frameworks, I would like to know how Kenya is prepared to handle such wastes, which are coming in terms of mitumba. We like mitumba in Kenya, but we are realizing that due to strict waste regulations abroad, most of the wastes are finding themselves in Kenya, and it's turning out to be a baggage or a burden to us. So I just want to hear what the panelists are saying about that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's keep it short. Let's hear from a few more. Okay, the gentleman there.
Okay, hello and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Terence. I work for Nestle. So I have a few questions to Gathoni. As a company, we have our own commitment regarding sustainability, plastics. So we have a commitment to ensure our packaging material is recyclable or reusable by 2025. And as part of the proposals you talked about to NEMA is enforcing on the design for recyclable structures on materials. So I just wanted you to maybe elaborate more. Have you engaged perhaps with other manufacturers in terms of the challenges they face with that transition? Because from my experience, in regards to projects that are aimed to achieving that, there are a few items that we've been able to pick up. One of them being maybe cost. The cost of conventional materials is less as compared to recyclable structures. So have you engaged with other manufacturers, and maybe what solutions are you bringing? And also, what framework or activities are you having with the packaging material suppliers in ensuring that, number one, these structures are available and affordable? Because it would be much easier if you are substituting something that will not have a cost impact or for you. Yeah, if they all cost the same, it will be much easier to be able to adopt them. Yeah, thank you so much.
Let's have the mic there.
Hi, thank you. Quick question. In the schemes of EPRs, we're subsidizing through polluter pay principles, but there's a new system coming out globally for carbon credits. So how do we see the two working together? Are they mutually exclusive? Can they be used together? Can we double dip and get credits from both sides? Or do we pick one or the other?
Let's have the last, how many more hands? Okay, I have 3 hands. Oh, and I can see Thomas also. So let's, oh, okay. Let's take those as the final hands. Yes, and I can hear the responses.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Rune Lund. I work for Seabrain, a Danish IT company. I'm the East Africa manager. And I'm based here in Nairobi with my family. And we have developed the digital platform for KEPRO, the Kenya Extended Producer Responsibility Organization. The Danish Environmental Protection Agency also uses our digital platform as their end-to-end solution to manage all their operations. And we have 3/4 of all Danish ministries to use our digital platform. Just to introduce myself, so my question would be, how do you see digitization play a role in this discussion? Because our experience that we can significantly reduce the time from political decision to implementation and execution by digitizing a lot of processes. So how would digitization help you in your work?
Was that directed to Petco? Okay.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Immaculate Otieno. I work with the German Agency for Development Cooperation, specifically in a program that is supporting the technical vocational education skills using the CBET methodology. And we borrow heavily the best practices of the dual training program from Germany. And I think as we transition as a country towards the circular economy. It will be very important to really take a skill audit and analyze where are the skill gaps so that we can be able to see that we are skilling our people so that when they come to the aspect of really dealing with the circular economy, we have well-skilled people, right from even the technician, even if it is from the primary level, going all through to the end. We are specifically interested to see how best we can partner with like-minded people to ensure that we can come up with curriculums that can support the skills that will help us thrive as a country in the circular economy. And I will be interested to hear if there's anyone with the skill gaps or any skills audit that has been done so that we can see how best we can work together going forward.
Good afternoon. My name is Nicodemus. I work with December West. I'm a recycler. Once again, I just want to extend my gratitude to NEMA for the positive engagement that we are experiencing. And my main concern or a question goes to our DJ. We are licensed with NEMA to operate within our entities that we have. But the challenge we have so far is the inter-county waste transfer. We are licensed with a nationwide or other countrywide license, but when you get into county again, there is regulations that they are formulated by the county governments. It becomes a challenge to us, especially in the industry. I would really wish that you could address it, sir, so that we can have a smooth flow of waste from one county to the other. Secondly, I would wish also to get clarification from the EPRO organizations, which we have. That is KEPRO, PACRO, and the rest. I know you are working hard with the recyclers. What is the communication between you and the association, which is the KAWR, that actually identifies the recyclers at the lower levels? Thank you.
Good afternoon. Okay, so I'm Anthony Migwi. I'm currently the president at Research, Innovation and Outreach, KCA University. So I'm currently standing on behalf of higher learning institutions. So as an innovation hub or a research, innovation and outreach division, we are very deliberate with the type of action that is done within our community practices. We totally understand the impact of research. We first have to do enough research. We totally understand enough research is being done in the country. Then using the research that is available, we have to innovate. That is necessary of us. It's either we innovate or perish, whatever type of business we're doing, whether it's financial innovation, manufacturing, whatever field that we want to get into, we have to innovate. Now, the last part that is becoming a tussle is the outreach. How well then do you integrate your innovations into the community or into the existing ecosystem that we are working with? So my current question to all of us is, how well are we open to receive young champions like us and innovators into your institutions? How easy is it for me and my team to come down and sit down with you and inform you as an organization you're supposed to be performing circular economy? That's correct, but we have some certain series of innovations that are able to reduce your cost structure. Why? Maybe you have innovations that are able to reduce the amount of fuel that you use a whole month, or maybe quarter your logistics activity. Now, the money that you've saved over fuel, then you're able to convert it into other areas of circular economy. So my question goes to, how well are you able to accommodate structures that integrate higher learning institutions into this place? Because we have a lot of students who have enough knowledge and they have enough time so that they're able to do the necessary research that is done, the necessary innovation that is done, and at last the commercialization and globalization of innovative products around circular economy. Thank you so much.
So that would apply both to government and private sector?
Yes, that will apply to government, private sectors, and also major organizations such as CAM, KEMSA, Rubicum, and Nevron. Thank you.
Okay. Let's have the last question from Thomas.
Thank you so much. Thomas Jensen, Danish Embassy. My question goes to Mr. Kahunen from the EU Commission. This morning, the CS, Honorable Tuija, said that the government is really keen on circular economy, and she also wanted to work with standards. To during my last 6 years living in Kenya, I really experienced that some of the European standards have done a lot of difference. KEPS, the Kenya Bureau of Standards, has now said to import a car, it has to live up to the Euro 4 standards. All of a sudden, some people approached me and wanted to buy my car because that was more worth because it was imported before the standards. All of these things, they matter, the standards matter. The GDPR European data standards matter a lot because Kenyans worry about their data. Do you have an instrument, is my question, to engage the Kenyan government to discuss how we can discuss European standards in Kenya? Many Kenyan manufacturers want to also export to the European market. By complying to European standard, you can gain a lot. So I would like to hear, do you have any modalities, any ways you can engage a discussion with the Kenyan government on circular economy? I know the EU is doing the Eco-Design Directive. From that, we could have a lot of things, the digital passport, all these things that we'd use. If we could agree on that, maybe in a tailored way to Kenya, I think a lot could be gained. So I would like to hear if you have such an instrument to use in Kenya. Over.
Thank you. Who wishes to go first?
Let me go first.
Okay.
Thank you. On the issue of plastic waste that comes through Mituba clothes, yeah, this has been in social media for some time. And I think we all know we had a ban from 2017 on the plastic ban that covers manufacture, use, and import plastics, both flat bags and carrier bags into our country. And I think this is really important for us as government to ensure that working through the multi-agency government agencies will be able to enhance our surveillance and enforcement action, because we really need to get to the bottom of this to really understand how these plastics come into our country. Maybe what is happening at the border post and other entry ports of our country. When we had this ban, we had lots of challenge. We have a very porous border. Plastics used to come from across the border. But through the engagement of the East African community, the environmental agencies of the East African community, we've been working together to ensure that we stop plastic coming into our country. Then from the CBRAIN digitization, as NEMA, we've already started working on digitizing all our licenses. We are already on a platform, the Citizen platform, e-Citizen platform, where you can apply for the license. And in future, I think we are looking at where our citizens will be able to print their licenses from the comfort of their homes or offices. We are working in rather improving on our ICT infrastructure. Nicodemus mentioned about inter-county licensing. Yeah, I know there are a lot of issues with inter-county licensing. We are working through the COG, Council of Governors. We have a forum with them. I know we'll be able to address this through the forum to be able to ensure that these are harmonized. Then Anthony, I think on higher education. 3 years ago, we had a network that we call Kenya Green Universities Network, where NEMA, UNEP, and the Commission for University Education are working on environmental sustainability, where we'll mainstream environmental issues into the curriculum of the universities, and also infrastructure, greening of infrastructure of the universities. We are working closely to ensure that even for the MDS, ministries, departments, and agencies will be able to influence this and have environmental sustainability being reported, because MDS report to us on environmental sustainability. I think we will scale up this with the research institution and higher education institutions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, DJ. We had some question to the EU delegate.
Well, thank you very much. I think I will address the question that Robert put, I think, on global value chains, and Thomas on standards, and perhaps also on the digitalization. I mean, you know, on the global value chains and how we should look at that, I mean, it's very clear that EU legislation is something that is happening at the rapid phase at the moment. We have you know, our Green Deal, which is essentially a lot about regulatory work within the EU. But obviously, you know, all that regulation has an impact, an external impact on our partners as well. And so the circular economy, I think, is no exception. I mean, the action plan that we have has introduced also a lot of regulatory measures that do have an impact on global value chains, such as, for example, the Sustainable Products Initiative, the Eco-Design Regulation, the Waste Shipment Legislation. And if you go beyond the circular economy, it doesn't stop there. We are talking of due diligence legislation, deforestation, and there are many examples where these standards that we are creating at European level do have an impact. Now, we are trying to push as International Partnership Department our internal discussions to more and more look not only on the impact of this legislation internally and push for impact assessments that also look at the global and external impacts. That has been a challenge, and we are knowledgeable about that, but we're working, and I think we're making progress. However, I think that it really begs for us to be able to also sort of, after we have legislated, to devise measures where we can support the capacities and compliance efforts that may be needed for our partners to live up to those standards. And not least because, obviously, I mean, it's very much at the core of what we want to do is to support Kenya, for example, to tap into the global value chains. And we are a very interesting market for Kenya, and I think that we have all the interest also from our side to help Kenya with sometimes quite challenging and rapid phase of regulatory work. Now, what kind of opportunities we have? Obviously, we are always there ready for dialogue, but then depending on the case, we do have means to do it through technical assistance, through short-term, whether targeted or more general way of tackling these things. There are also some exchanges. We are also these days expanding our twinning and TIEX opportunities, which could then provide you know, on-hand exchanges where someone from EU knowledgeable of what we have done would come and help the government. So this is really what we would like to do, because we don't want to stifle you know, the markets, and the global value chains are key for us. So that support is there, and we are very much, I think, ready to increase it also. Now, on the digitalization, maybe just to mention that, I mean, the green transition will not happen without digitalization. And I think, again, I mean, our role as EU is the same as with other challenges. We are certainly you know, ready to look at the digitalization challenge in the circular economy area and see then whether we can do also some support there. It's very much, I think, present in many parts of the green transition, but also in this area. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think I like that reaction. I think one thing you've really put across, which members should note, is the support that is there. I think there has been a debate in various circles, especially if you go into the trade circles. There's a lot of trade being affected, going to EU based on the Green Deal and the various legislation that are coming, and how to comply and how not to stifle the value chains and what support exists. I think that's a good point. There was a question also around double dipping. I don't know whether, Prien, you had mentioned the move in the global economy. You want to take it up?
Yeah, or maybe, well, There are so many questions, so I took notes. So let me start with that one. I think international plastic credits, which I'm assuming what you're referring to, is corporates paying an offsetting fee for plastics to recycle their own plastics or the equivalent amounts, and the plastics they should sponsor should be plastics that otherwise would not have been recycled. So in a perfect world, when EPR was so efficient that everything gets recycled, there shouldn't be a role for plastic. Mitumba. Like if you look at bales, yes, there is waste in Mitumba. I think we don't need to deny that. But I strongly, from what we have seen, it is not 30 to 50% what the report is stating, but it's somewhere 5% or lower. Because also purely looking at financially, people wouldn't spend fortunes of importing it, spending a lot of money on taxes if 50% of it was waste. So I think there is a problem, but the majority of textile waste we are seeing is actually a little bit of that waste. A lot of it is just end-of-life textiles when people have worn the Mitumbas and no longer use them and discard them. That's where we're seeing most of the waste. And also separately, we also need to be honest that even locally produced textile produces significant amounts of waste because offcuts and things like that also produce waste. So I think the picture there is a bit more nuanced than that report suggests from our point of view. Quickly to the other questions. EU directive, so I think the EU will in the future probably be one of the biggest import markets for high quality waste materials and plastics, because the EU is putting regulations in place such that there will be paid a premium eventually for recycled plastic, because the EU is forcing manufacturers to use plastics, which is great. So naturally, I think Kenyan companies looking to export should orient themselves against EU standards, because this is where there will be premium prices in the future compared to other markets. And then I think, lastly, on the skill gap, I think, yeah, it would be great if there are more things, especially technical, very practical things, forklift driving, wheel loader driving, welding, things like that, and ideally even a lot focused on women. That is a quick comment there. And then lastly, on research, so from our point of view, I think a lot of the technology exists, but maybe knowing how to pick the technology, knowing which technology to use, and knowing how to install it, implement it, that's where the challenge lies. So I think I wouldn't necessarily put the focus on inventing local technology as much as trying to, I know what technology can be used where, under what conditions, and how to actually use it, implement it, install it, and maintain it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. Just a few comments on the questions for higher education innovation and for skills gap. For the first one on innovation, totally agree, and it's something we're discussing with KEPRO in our partnership, that in a way we are establishing two new economies, a plastic economy and a waste management economy, and we are talking very high level today. We need to avoid this becoming like a wild west where everybody's producing to different standards. There's a high demand for innovation from university side, perhaps being tied into the MRFs that will be established at county level in the future, perhaps could be an idea. So you have an innovation center next to an MRF, so it's connected to the community. It could be a model we are talking to KEPRO about. But it's high time that universities, they get involved in this discussion as well. So we avoid it being this very, very high level discussion. On skills gap, you asked from GSZ, have you done any audits, right? And I totally agree with you. I mean, if you look at Kenya, where the median age is 18 years, right? We need to bring curricula into even primary schools and high school levels at this point. And has there been audits done? Yes, we've looked into the water sector and the construction sector in Kenya. And we can see there's a massive skills gap between what the industry wants and needs at this current point and the curricula that's already in place at NITA level. So we are busy tweaking those existing curricula into a more industry or demand-led way of training. So totally agree with your point. Thanks.
KEPRO?
PAC Pro? Yes, we apologize. The names do sound similar. But we do offer a similar solution, so we're here for you. Regarding the design, You mentioned someone from Nestle. Yes, we do support manufacturers. It starts with a negotiation. So we don't necessarily say this is what you have to start at. We sit at a round table. I think the beauty that voluntary EPR has led us to is that we bring all producers to a table and then say this is where government needs us to go, and this is also where the world needs us to go. What are the steps you need to take to get here? How can you move? What are the strategic steps, year 1, 2, 3, 5, 10? And so then there is a forcing you have to move at some point, and then now that it's going to be mandatory, then there will be definite markers. So before, when we were a voluntary scheme, the push was really global push. So, and suggestions from the EPR scheme. But as it will be now, there are very many requirements that the PRO will have to set up. It will have to set up a standard for what targets we are putting for recyclability. And this is in partnership as well with the Kenya Plastics Pact, where, if you're aware, there are certain standards they've already said we want to get to 40% recyclable material in our products. So those targets then push us to operationalize how that will go. And one of the other things then the PRO would do is support and give some form of relief. Sort of like if you have insurance, you get a relief. Just an incentive to our producers to say, okay, you have done this much in improving your product design. How can we then say, thank you for doing a good job? So those are some of the conversations we're saying, come to the table, let's have that discussion in terms of how can we shift your product to being a green product? What is the cost it's going to take? You're paying EPR fees, how can we then figure out that modality? So regarding that. And then when it comes to subsidizing recyclers, and especially the SME recyclers, linking with the Association of Waste Recyclers, we are in constant conversation with the Association of Waste Recyclers. We do meet, we do engage, so we do know that there are SMEs going on. So when EPR was happening, we were a voluntary organization, and that meant our capacity, or at any one point, our support to the recyclers is based off the capacity that our producers have. So they have X, then we support X minus, of course, admin fees. So as we continue to expand, then that continues to expand our support to as many recyclers as possible. So one thing I would want to give as a disclaimer or as a take into consideration is that implementing a policy is definitely like moving a ship from one direction to the other. So there's a lot of excitement because there's going to be a lot of support coming in, and we are very excited to give support. But we also want to give sustainable support, and we also want to make sure everyone understands how we are shifting. So we would urge that all the value chain stakeholders, from collectors to transporters to aggregators to recyclers, pre-processors, exporters, to some extent the PRO supports you at every capacity in conjunction with government, county governments, national government, regulators, etc. So pulling all these people into one ship and having everyone support at different entry points, that will require a lot of deliberation to ensure that what we start, we can sustain. So it might seem sometimes that we're moving a bit slower than the industry and you're ready for us. I would say keep asking. Your questions are very good because then you keep us on our toes as well, but also understand the process of moving and shifting gears. And then, especially when the law has been passed, there will be a 6-month period. So it will not be the assentment happens today and tomorrow everyone is here for us. So we understand that the investment cost to the producers is going to be very high. So the conversation to you producers, of course, is to start looking at your budgets now, because once it happens, you will only have 6 months, which is good, but not entirely forever. When it comes to young innovators, one of the things the PRO will be is a knowledge hub. So there is definitely opportunity for us to also be a research center for design, for projects, collection projects. So that capacity is there for you to come and plug into us And right now, we still do a lot of research engagement with schools. So we're constantly giving feedback, having one-on-one engagements with different universities, both local and international. So reach out to us on our platforms and we'll be able to feedback with you. When it comes to the digitization, I think it's really, it goes without saying yes, 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 and more yeses. That handling the data, I think if with the audit processes that will be involved, handling all our members' data, handling the recyclers and collectors' data, keeping that safe and secure, handling the privacy issues, that can only be digitized. So we appreciate the role that's going to take, and that's definitely an area for support in terms of expertise and technical know-how on how to handle that.
Thank you so much. Well, 2 hours are over. Can you imagine? We can talk this the whole day. I think that has been quite engaging. I feel like we are on a takeoff. Definitely, we have 2 legislations which are about to be implemented fully, as DG has mentioned. And this discussion or forum wouldn't have come more timely than this. I believe this discussion will go on. Business having the expertise and experience, and of course government being there to support the private sector. I want to challenge the private sector, Takataka, PACPRO, and the rest. If you could bring in these suggestions, I know my DG would be very receptive to them. On policy areas, reforms, and incentives that you feel that then government can look at it. So allow us to end it there, colleagues, delegates. I think we need to really give a warm appreciation to the panel before us. Thank you so much. I think now we're going to hand it over back
growth
to Joyce.
Across people of different backgrounds,
so much,
cultures, and regions. If this situation is left unattended, we might reach a critical breaking point. We need to work towards sustainable growth that protects our world while giving rise to new economic opportunities. This February, the Kenya Loop Forum brings together stakeholders of the circular economy to find practical solutions that will help reduce waste, enhance recycling, and pursue cleaner production. Innovators, entrepreneurs, investors, policymakers, development partners, learning centers, and research institutions will take part in discussions guided by the global agenda around energy efficiency and circular economy. We will address the growing need to adopt a green and sustainable manufacturing